Welcome back to another SuperCoach video with me, JD. You are joining me for the round 20 review. My week has been okay, a top 3K rank for the round. A small move up into the 3K overall, which is definitely a good result given where I was earlier in the year. But before we jump into SuperCoach content and the SuperCoach side of the video, I do have something else to do, and it is related to my fantasy team, which I'll just quickly show here. So 12th overall, moved up 8 ranks, and that is wholly responsible because of one person, Mason Redman. And I did promise that if Mason went big, that there would be some dues paid up front. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a big fan of Mason, but last week I missed out on the weekly because he got subbed out at 42 through no fault of his own. And then coming into this week, him being a massive pod for me, very much a concern, right? Will he get up? Will he be laid out? That was definitely the thought online. But look, Mason Redman is no ordinary player. 3 weeks ago, had COVID, came back best on ground. And I was pretty confident that he could come back and score well, even off that internal bruising. And look, I had some inside word on him. He did have to spend a little bit of time in hospital, but true to the tough player he is, he got up and said, "Don't worry, you don't need to trade me. You can hold on. I'm going to go big anyway." And boy, did he go big. He returned the favour in spades. I traded out short instead. That was like a 60-point game, which is huge. And so to tribute to Redman this week, we're going to have to activate Redman Vision. Here we go. The celebration all time. Now, what a huge game from Redman. And honestly, for SuperCoach, it was even bigger than what you saw on Fantasy. It was like a 170 for those that had him. And it really had everything. He was very efficient with the ball in hand. I think he had over 30 efficient touches. The intercept marking was very good, a big highlight of the game. Getting involved in the rebounding play off half back, and even moved forward to take a handoff goal, which he's done a few times now across his career. It was great. And so I don't know where the celebration that we're using came from. I've heard multiple origin stories from like friends that he used to play with, did it through to it being his nickname. But it should definitely be the dog ears because Redman has the dog in him. And I know REDDOG's his nickname, but he was fantastic this week. And I hope his mates that have been feeding me the inside word pass on a very big thank you to Redman because he was huge this week. Loved his game. And from a SuperCoach perspective, very handy for me for 2 reasons. One, he's on the watch list for next year as a player that we should be starting. So definitely. And then secondly, as a lot of you know, I brought in Stringer as a off the bench kind of player this week who was filling in for Cogs, and Redman fed him more than one. I think it was at least 2 really good inside 50 kicks that resulted in shots on goal. So Redman, I owe you across all formats. You were fantastic today, and we're gonna play our Redman Vision for the rest of the week. I'll probably find a Redman thumbnail as well with the celebration too, because yeah, he's earned it. All right, so into the SuperCoach side of the game. So yeah, as I mentioned, moved up the ranks again, top 3K now, which is really good. I was, 27K in round 7, so we've been moving up the ranks surely but steadily. Lots of poor players this week from a SuperCoach perspective. I think many were in the same boat though, which is why I still moved up despite others kind of, having poor games as well. So just going through defense quickly. Sinclair was good, kind of worked through a bit of a tag here to get the 102. I think it was dropped in the second half of the game, which helped him get to this score, which was very good. Still going to have those ceiling games when he's not being tagged, which is great. Himmelberg was the big concern this week. So after being one of the best intercept defenders since he was moved forward post Leon Cameron's departure, they decided randomly to try him at forward again this week. And he did kick a goal early, but ultimately didn't have as much impact as he did as a defender. They moved him back there where he was promptly tagged by Clark from the Swans. Not great, but look, a 74, all things considered in this game, is okay. And I think we'll get him just in defense from here on out, which should be much better. Should be much better, despite, I guess, Essendon being a tougher team to score on this week. Dawson was very good, what we've come to expect from him. Been fantastic and was one of the better players for the Crows there in that game. Doherty, I think it was another one where he had a really poor dream team or like fantasy SuperCoach ratio where it just hasn't been as efficient and as useful as what you would like to see from him. And then, Short and Crisp, like to get rid of these. Short was like so concerning. So they started him off behind the ball, which was what everyone was hoping for, given where he has scored in the past. And he butchered it basically non-stop for the first quarter, half, whatever it is. No, quarter. It was the first quarter. Then he got moved forward and kicked a goal to help his scoring, but otherwise didn't do much. And then I think he got moved up closer to the ball a little bit in the last half. So I'm not sure if the Tigers know what they're doing with him. Didn't have a great game. It kind of mentioned someone that we wouldn't have minded jumping off if he had the trades. I don't, unfortunately, which is why I'm stuck with him. Crisp, also in the same boat, by the way, someone I would have loved to jump off. Pies aren't scoring much from a SuperCoach perspective at all. That's across the board. So that's hurting a lot of their players at the moment. But yeah, these two are just would love to be off. In defense, on the bench, D'Ambrosio returned, and he was pretty good today. What we had Caldwell do a calf, and Shields got some problem with his hamstring, so it does leave a couple of spots open. McGrath has to return, though, so I'm not sure if that will affect Ambrosio. Potentially could, but yeah. 49's okay. Cash gen doesn't matter, but just having some bench cover would be good, so hopefully he holds. In the midfield, we had some really big games from a lot of players. So Laird has continued on. His stretch at the moment is phenomenal. 3-round average 146, 5-round 139. Since picking him up post-bye, which is when a lot of us targeted him based on fixture and his form to that point, his lowest has been a 114, and then I think everything else has been 125 plus, which is insane. This is one of the best 8 game streaks, 7-8 game streaks, whatever it's been, of any player in the comp. Now over 700k, which is a very rare thing to see in this game. I think we had Oliver do it earlier in the year, and that's otherwise been it. And he's still got a very nice run coming. So in the last 3 games, West Coast and North, 2 of the easier midfields to score on. Port is definitely the most restrictive and the hardest of the group. That could be the one that breaks the trend, but you would imagine against West Coast and North, he continues this insane streak. I mean, even against Port, he might do it as well. But if you were to pick one game where he might underperform, it'll be Port. But yeah, Laird has been huge. Miller, is this back-to-back 150s for him? Kind of a little bit surprising, really, because he was down on form, looking back and better, like closer to his old self. The only concern was he did have like a shoulder knock that didn't look great, and then in the last 10 seconds of the game, he kind of got bowled over and landed awkwardly on his shoulder head area. So I hope there's no concussion concerns out of that. That'd be the only drawback. His fixture is very nice. Hawks and North, once again, 2 of the easy midfields to score on. Geelong sandwich in the middle isn't great. But yeah, he's been very good and will hopefully continue to be good from here. Oliver struggled for a second week back with that hand. He also got tagged by Aish, which doesn't help. I would still imagine that he comes good from here. Collingwood this week, easiest midfield to score on. So I think we see a bounce back game. But yeah, this hasn't been the Oliver that we were treated to at the first half of the year. But yeah, I think he bounces back. I do think he bounces back. And, you know, people like McRae's been underperforming, doesn't have the same excuses. Merritt was insane. Oh my God. So the first half was very lackluster, and that's why his score isn't much higher in SuperCoach. In fantasy, was it a 172? It was a 172. So he still had a negative 32 ratio. He had 6 holding the balls. I want to say he kicked a goal, had goal assists and stuff as well. But a lot of this came in the second half once Bombers were already up in the lead, so you don't get the same scoring and scaling for that. But he had something like 108 points for fantasy in the second half alone, which was, just to give you an idea, that is crazy. That's probably got to be one of the top halves of the year, if not the top half of the year. So yeah, look, 5-round average 139.2 now. Crazy. In the last 5, what's his lowest score been? 133 last week. That was it. So yeah, after his bye, once again, we targeted him as a cheap pickup. He had a couple of poorer games, and then about 5 weeks ago, they moved him more ahead of the ball, less behind the ball, and he's absolutely run with that. I think Parrish being out has helped as well, because getting more CBAs, more time up on the ball, and he's killing it on the contested front. His long, effective kicking's been good. His tackling's been great. He's a top 5 mid from here. Neil, A bit of the same for Neil as what we've seen over the last 5 weeks. So just a 115, 5 round average, which is serviceable. It's fine. And he's obviously been tagged in the middle of that as well. Just has looked, I think, a little bit off what his best looks like. By no means bad. And he recovered, I think, what was going to be a poor score pretty well in this one. But yeah, just hasn't looked amazing. Carlton, Saints, and Melbourne in the next three, which Carlton and Melbourne on the harder side for scoring. So I wouldn't expect great stuff. I think the only good thing, though, is that Carlton and Melbourne don't tag. Saints have been using Windhager, and that's definitely, I think, a tag that will come. Carlton could use Hewitt if he's back, which it sounds like he won't be. I'm sure they've got someone else as well, but yeah, they're not really obvious taggers. And then Melbourne probably won't, would be my guess. Although they have used Harms to tag people. Did they use Harms to tag Neil not that long ago? I don't know. That seems to like sit in my mind. But anyway, who's Merritt's next week? Because I think it's not too bad, right? GWS, Port's restrictive, and Richmond's fine. So I think the only thing is with Merritt being so good the last 5, we could see an hashtag coming to Merritt from the Giants. One to watch out for. McRae has been disappointing. There's no other way to say it than to be disappointing. And with all the dogs back, he just seems to be getting less opportunity. It doesn't help that they were smashed. And generally, Geelong, I think, did a pretty good job restricting the dogs' opportunity to use the ball a lot, which is what they tend to do. Next 3 is Freo, Giants, Hawks. So Freo, I think, is a tough matchup, but then these last 2 are decent. So look at these Giants. He hasn't gone below 133 in the last 3. Hawthorn, these are really good scores too. It's just the Freo one. It's a little bit of a worry. So it's still probably a hold. I can't imagine too many teams are in the position where you actually trade McRae, but just disappointing. And like a big question of whether we start next year. I wonder if he's starting to decline or just struggling with the availability in that midfield, but at the same time, like a 117 average will be the cheapest he'll have been in years. So I can see that going both ways. Cripps. So he had another huge score, and his average without Hewitt in the side has been huge, like into the 130s. It's only, a 4-game sample size, which isn't great, but you definitely can see that he gets more opportunity and is used more coming out of like their stoppages without Hewitt being there, which has led to greater scoring. So as long as Hewitt stays out, Cripps is going to continue to score well. I think once Hewitt comes back, you may see a little bit of regression. Brisbane has been very restrictive. There must be some injury-affected games in here, I would imagine. But yeah, I don't think he's getting tagged in probably any of these games. Collingwood's the one that he could score well on, but Hewitt should be back by then, which probably offsets that. Not amazing matchups here for Cripps. And then, can we optimize? Let's click the optimize button. Oh, it's benching Cripps for Cogs. It's probably not going to happen. And then, so the only other one I missed over was Petrarca, who 134. Look, it's the trend is kind of continued, right? He said these big ceiling games, 189, 141, 134, mixed with some 80s in between. Which Petrarca are you getting on a given week? Bit hard to say. His history against Collingwood isn't actually that good, but Collingwood are one of the easiest midfields to score on. So you'd imagine he does go big. We'll have to wait and see. And then, as mentioned with Oliver, like these Carlton Brisbane matchups, probably not great. But he can go big in big games, so it's a little bit hard to tell with Petrarca, but he's okay enough as mid now. We had Owens come back this week, played more forward rather than on the ball, and looked pretty good. So I would imagine that he can hold his spot. I think he played well enough to hold, but we'll see. I might have cover in both D'Ambrosio and Owens for the week, which would be really handy. In the rucks, so Darcy went head-to-head with Gawn. I think Gawn got the better of it, but I do feel like this 92 was like underscored a little bit. And Wits, I thought he could have gone bigger than an 85. Rucks have kind of underperformed, I want to say, outside of those that picked up Marshall. But if you picked up Marshall, it was probably in your forward line. He went huge. And it's very fortunate for those that picked him up, because you had this situation where Tom Campbell was named, and it meant that anyone was going to get on this week probably didn't, because they're worried about how the second ruck would affect him, much like Ryder did. But then that was a laid out, so you kind of got to keep Marshall as unique, got a really big score. So yeah, quite fortunate there. So in the forward line here, so Bont was probably one of the best dogs, but couldn't bring him over the line. English over here wasn't particularly good. to be honest. He's been a bit up and down now, which is I'm a little bit concerned about what English we're going to get. The interesting tactic from Geelong side was they were using Blitzer at stoppages to go with Bont, kind of like how they used him with Cripps. But then once the stoppage had kind of been done, he would then run with English around the ground because I guess Segler couldn't. So you move Segler up forward, you get Blitz to cover English. It was a really interesting strategy by Geelong and it worked. Maybe English does a little bit better with Darcy being his opposition this week. Oh yeah, and Dunkley, this 130, I didn't think he had a 130 game. I didn't think he was that good, but I'm not going to complain. Especially after a couple of down games, we'll take that. The Swans boys, Heaney and Parker. I thought Parker was near best on ground. Who actually won the medal for that? I can't tell you. But yeah, Parker was right up there. I thought he was very good. And then Heaney, picking him for the fixture has definitely paid off a bit because he's now got a 5-round average of 98, 3-round average of 105, has North this week into Collingwood, into Saints. So I would imagine against both North and Collingwood, he can score well. Probably even the Saints as well, depending on where they're at that point. Cogs was obviously let out. It was just soreness. It wasn't a proper injury. So you'd imagine he's back this week. And then Stringer was my cover, which has been amazing as a pod cover. He's been so good for me. Look, 5-round and 3-round averages haven't looked great, but I've fielded, I think, this 89 and the 114, and I maybe even fielded this 86. I can't remember how long I've had him, but 3 pretty good scores, and I've dodged the 54 and the 68. He's been benched for both of those. So he's been very handy for me. He's probably averaging over 100 when I fielded him. Okay. I think that's the team rundown quickly. In terms of must talk about topics this week, there's not really too much. I think if Took gets injured, that'll obviously be a hot one. Hewitt is probably not back this week from what I've seen. So, yeah. And then Cogs, I think, probably is back. So we'll just see how we go. But yeah, I think most people are probably locked into whatever path they've taken on those. As always, with this time of year, it's hard for me to just make broad philosophical statements around what you should be doing with your trades. It's best just to ask me questions. I'll try and get to everyone, ask them in terms of who are you weighing up, what options you're looking at, etc., etc. There was someone whose name escapes me at the moment, but we were messaging because he was looking at basically cheap options. And I think the ones that we ended up talking about, which is ones he wanted to do. So I just bounced ideas off him, but Hayden Young was one who went 110. I think the other was Berry, who hopefully went okay. But yeah, these aren't trades I would normally recommend. Oh, 70. Not the best. These aren't trades that I would normally recommend, but when you're in that situation where you've got to find cheaper options, then yeah, it's best just to ask for that one-on-one advice. And I'll try and help you out where I can. Okay, so only other thing we need to talk about this week is probably team setup and then captain, vice captain. So for me, I guess I'll have Stringer as probably my forward loophole and then loop him with, it's hard to say I'll loop him with Heaney, maybe Dunkley, maybe Cogs. Oh, Cogs and Essendon play each other, so I guess I'll know what's happening there. And then captain, vice captain. So Swans against North, Mills I think has to be a captain consideration this week. Or a vice captain consideration because we do have Laird against West Coast. So Laird against West Coast is probably going to be my C. I don't have Mills, so I don't have to weigh up with that. Melbourne against Collingwood, I think brings in both Petrarca and Oliver as options, although it's a little bit hard to trust Oliver at the moment. GWS against Essendon is normally, I'd say, pretty good for mids, but Merritt may get tagged, worries me a touch. Gold Coast are playing Hawthorn, so Took Miller is definitely a consideration. The only thing to think about here is whether McGuinness goes to him, which would make sense given how good Miller has been. So it could be getting a tag there. Dogs against Freo, so I probably wouldn't be looking at VCing any of either team in that matchup. Brisbane against Carlton, I probably wouldn't look at anyone there either. So honestly, I think if you've got Mills into Laird and you've got some way of loopholing them, that seems perfect for me. There's no overlap between those games either. You should know about half hour beforehand what Mill's final score is going to be. Otherwise, for myself, it might be Miller into Laird, or it could be like Oliver Petrarca. It could be Oliver Petrarca. I mean, Petrarca's got that ceiling, so you could see him go off against Collingwood, with that high ceiling, and then go into it. But yeah, maybe it's Miller. Although I don't trust him through a tag. I have to talk about that during the week. Have a bit of a think about where McGuinness is going if it's to Miller. But yep, that's my team for the week. Once again, big ups to Redmond, my boy claiming him. As always, ask your questions below. I'll try and help you best you can. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Wishing you all... Oh, wait, no. One last thing, actually. I just want to show you one last thing. So I do have a cash league that I'm a part of. And I don't know many of the guys in it, but one that I do know is the one, is it game day, that I went head-to-head with this week. So it was first versus fourth on the ladder. Coming into it, I was 240 or 50 points behind in the last game, and Merritt and Stringer going large together. The 140, the 114 got me over the line. So very pleased with that. Oh, feels so good. Yeah, it's at that time of the year where leagues, when your league's finals may be going on. And if you do want to ask me about league-specific stuff, you can as well. Just let me know. It's obviously a little bit different advice to overall. I was a league player before I started doing overall, so I've kind of got a fair bit of experience with that as well. But yeah, lots of W's this week. Take that. Just the one loss. Oh yeah, this guy went like 2,600, had Marshall and Redmond playing on field, so props to him. All right, that's everything for the week. Thank you as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.